If I told you the most important company in AI started at Denny's, you wouldn't believe me. But what these three guys started became one of the most powerful tech companies on the planet.
Hi, welcome to Nvidia.
This is the story of how Nvidia survived long enough to become essential. And whether you are building a company, a career, or just figuring out what's next, there is a lot in here for all of us to learn. So let's dive into it. Three engineers walked into Denny's and started a company that would define the future of intelligence. One of those engineers, Jensen Huang. The funny thing is, they didn't set out to build the greatest AI engine of their time. They just wanted to make video games look better. Their passion was to bring cinematic quality graphics to real-time gameplay. Back then, and I'm talking about 1993, if you wanted to make great animation, you needed a lot of computing power and expensive workstations from companies like Silicon Graphics and Sun. An entry-level Indigo 2 at that point started at $34,000. A fully spec'd version, around $86,000. Meanwhile, a high-end PC would cost around $3,000. But it couldn't render awesome animation easily. In 1993, when Jurassic Park was released, the world finally saw the power of 3D graphics rendered on a computer, because those dinosaurs were created on workstations made by Silicon Graphics. So, what our three friends at Denny's wanted to do was to bring the same power to PCs. The PC revolution was just beginning. And even though Windows 95 hadn't launched yet, the tech world was full of companies making sound cards and networking cards. Gaming wasn't even considered a real industry then. But the founders had a simple hope. If you build it, they will come. Huge bet, huge risk. So they sketched a design on a napkin for a real-time graphics chip. And that's how Nvidia started. Pancakes, coffee, and a shared ambition. Fun fact, Jensen worked as a dishwasher at Denny's when he was young. And his favorite dish was the Superbird. That's the kind of simple, humble diner meal that eventually led to a $1 trillion enterprise. But then came the biggest question, funding. Jensen was introduced to Sequoia Capital. Now, according to him, he totally bombed the presentation. But the VC firm saw something in him, and they invested. It was a $2 million round with $6 million post-money valuation. Crazy to think that a $3 trillion company was once valued at $6 million. There were over 70 graphic startups fighting to be the first. Remember, we're talking about a time where Google or Meta weren't even born yet. Pretty soon, Microsoft Gaming took off, and gamers got hooked on games like Doom and Quake. Demand for 3D graphics was just exploding. Nvidia launched its first product around then too, the NV1. It was bold, ambitious. At first, things started off strong. They landed a deal with Sega to power their arcade machines and next-gen home consoles. But Nvidia and Sega chose to base their graphics system on quadrilaterals instead of triangles. And that became a huge problem. This is because Microsoft had realized the potential of gaming, and it introduced Direct 3D, which evolved into DirectX later. But it was a new industry standard to program 3D graphics directly using Windows operating system. And of course, DirectX used triangles, the most efficient shape for rendering any 2D or 3D surface. And just as Microsoft PC gaming takes off, Nvidia's chip becomes already obsolete. They sold 250,000 chips, and 249,000 came back. The market had spoken, and it wasn't pretty. The biggest lesson is next, the gamble of honesty. Remember the first chip that didn't work? Unfortunately, their next move made survival even harder. Their follow-up product, NV2, was also incompatible with industry standards and became obsolete before it was even released. The only customer that had signed up was Sega. In fact, Nvidia was already busy manufacturing NV2 when Sega told them it was switching horses and adapting DirectX. Nvidia had picked its own lane, but the rest of the world was now driving in the opposite direction. And the company had only 9 months of runway left before bankruptcy. Jensen at that point had two choices: finish the Sega contract and run out of cash slowly, or cancel it and run out of cash instantly. It's like being in the driver's seat in a car without brakes, staring at a cliff that's approaching fast. But there's always a third way hiding beneath the only two ways we think we have. The Nvidia CEO believed that there was a third choice. So he flew to Japan to meet the Sega CEO. He looked him in the eye and told him the honest-to-God truth, that NV2 wasn't going to work for Sega and that Sega should find another chip partner. As bold as it sounds, he asked Sega to pay Nvidia the full contractual amount anyway, because without that money, Nvidia wasn't going to survive. Some would call it gutsy, others might call it honest. Either way, it worked. Nvidia lived to see another day. Next is one of my favorite lessons. Sometimes the most important win is to simply stay alive. Nvidia laid off 75% of the team, down to just 35 employees. And those who stayed knew the truth. They had to build a new chip from scratch and ship it in under 9 months or game over. Normally, chip design takes about 18 to 24 months. It's a very slow, cumbersome process involving back and forth with a fab like TSMC. Nvidia did not have that luxury, so they took a wild gamble. They tested their design using a software emulator instead of building hardware. They sent the final design to a second-tier fab in Taiwan, the only one willing to work with them at that point. The fab company was like, "Hey guys, are you sure about this?" Nvidia was like, yes, we're pretty sure. Just go to print. And it was the biggest Hail Mary in company history. In 1997, when they were finally able to release their first chip that was compatible with industry standard, Nvidia had only enough cash left in the bank for just one more payroll. They were 30 days away from going bankrupt. But once again, the gamble paid off. Sure enough, the chip was buggy, but it was also a total beast. Way more powerful than anything else in the market. They sold nearly 1 million units in its first 4 months. Somehow, Nvidia was saved from the brink once again. So the team learned two big lessons. One, how to get the best performance per dollar. And two, how to ship a new chip in 6 months when everybody else was taking 2 years. Sometimes necessity really is the mother of invention. And then came 1999. This is the year when Nvidia launched GeForce, their first GPU. It wasn't just a faster engine, it was a new kind of brain built for complex parallel computations. So think of it this way. A CPU is like a chef cooking a very complex gourmet meal. A GPU is an army of line cooks, each one of them flipping their own burger all at once. Nvidia innovated so fast that it reshaped the entire industry. GeForce was flying off the shelf. The company went public in 1999 and reached a $600 million market cap. A 100x return on that $6 million post-money valuation. When they went public, they had $150 million of revenue. Next year, it went to $375 million. The year after, doubles again to $735 million, and then doubles again at $1.4 billion. That's just incredible growth. But the biggest unlock of their success, becoming a platform. Nvidia launched CUDA, a platform that allowed scientists to program and customize all the Nvidia GPUs for specific computing tasks in scientific areas like molecular biology or fluid dynamics or financial modeling. Now, what's interesting about this is that there was no market demand yet, but Jensen had a belief that the future would need it, and he built it anyway. But there was one big issue. CUDA had very little to do with gaming, which was Nvidia's core market at that point. Wall Street just didn't get it. And meanwhile, ATI and AMD were catching up fast to Nvidia. The competition was getting tougher, margins were shrinking, and then Nvidia missed their earnings. The stock plummeted by 80%. How do you recover from something like that? What most people missed was this. Nvidia was slowly pivoting away from graphics and moving toward parallel computing. There was no killer app for it yet, but Jensen knew it was going to come. In tech, you just have to stay in the game for a long time. So from 2006 to about 2012, Nvidia kind of meandered. Growth was flat or modest at times. In 2011, they missed again. Stock fell another 50%. People started writing them off. What they really needed was a miracle. Next is when the Big Bang finally happens. In 2012, a team entered a competition called ImageNet at the University of Toronto.
Now, the ImageNet competition is effectively the World Cup for machine learning and computer vision.
Everyone was given 14 million labeled images with 1,000 object categories. And all the teams had just one challenge: to teach machines how to see. Now, most teams used traditional tools and came up with average results, except for this one team. They did something completely different. They trained a deep neural network called AlexNet. It had about 60 million parameters. That was massive at that time. Processing at that scale would have taken weeks or even months for other teams. AlexNet finished it in days. And they didn't just win, they shattered all performance benchmarks and literally pulled the future forward. And what made this tech miracle possible? 2 GPU cards made by, you guessed it, Nvidia. This moment became a turning point for the entire industry. And GPUs were now the future of all AI. If every other team in that competition was driving a Prius, AlexNet showed up in an F1 car with jet boosters. Suddenly, deep learning and high-performance computing was everywhere. And it didn't just shake the tech world, it's something that ended up touching all of us. AI wasn't just a research project, it was something that hundreds of millions of us started using every day. AI had moved from recognizing images and words to generating them. Of course, Jensen did not plan AlexNet. He did not see it coming. It was indeed the miracle Nvidia needed. And sometimes I think you have to survive long enough to catch the right wave. Nvidia now held the keys to the most valuable gates in tech. Gates that could open a new $10 trillion market. But Nvidia didn't slow down. They made 3 bets, each bigger than the last. The Big Bang happened, and there was no time to celebrate. What happened in the next 5 years defied gravity. Jensen accelerated the pace of innovation like no one else. They made 3 decisive strategic plays. First, the Tensor Core architecture. Volta was their first product that introduced Tensor Cores. Now, that's an architecture built to accelerate matrix math. And that's the language of neural networks and deep learning. Then came Ampere, then Hopper. Second, Nvidia assembled all the AI capabilities in a box. It was their DGX line, complete AI supercomputers in a box to democratize AI models. And one of those AI boxes, it was donated to a scrappy, unknown nonprofit called OpenAI, the company that built ChatGPT. And third, Nvidia embedded itself into every major cloud provider. Amazon, Microsoft, Google. Nvidia positioned itself as the AI platform of choice, from image recognition to self-driving cars, from Hollywood effects to social media feeds, from ad targeting to crypto mining, all the way to models like ChatGPT and Gemini. All that hustle, all that speed, all that innovation, it paid off. Nvidia's revenue went from $27 billion to $61 billion in 1 year. And the next year, it crossed $130 billion. Everyone says Nvidia is unstoppable, but are they? Here's the truth about Nvidia that most of us don't realize, that the hardest climb is yet to come. Nvidia is one of the most valuable companies in the world today. And that also means that the investor expectations are sky high. Today, Nvidia has come a long way from the graphics cards days. It's not just about GPUs anymore. They now offer the entire machine learning stack. Architecture, systems, data centers, hardware, CUDA, SDKs, drivers, all of it bundled together. And that kind of full stack dominance gives them pricing power. And that's why their gross margin is a jaw-dropping 65%. And there are 3 massive threats. Threat number 1, Nvidia's largest customers can't wait to get out. That's right. And these are the companies we know: Google, Microsoft, Amazon. They've become too dependent on Nvidia, and they don't like that. So they're building their own silicon, their own homegrown chips. Google has TPUs. Amazon's got Trainium. Microsoft is building Maya. And these aren't some side projects or experiments. These are billion-dollar moonshots built by companies with a lot of capital and world-class talent. That's a real risk. And we have to recognize that recreating that stack is a massive challenge. You're talking about chip-to-chip networking, rack-level systems, relationships with the best fabs in the world, deep customizable software libraries. Is all insanely capital intensive. Threat number 2, geopolitical fracture. The US government has banned many of the Nvidia chips in China. In 2025, Nvidia was left holding $5.5 billion of unsellable inventory because of that. And that geopolitical shift has opened a huge window of opportunity for all the domestic competitors in China who are dying to take on Nvidia. So that's another real threat. And threat number 3, Nvidia's own skill. Now think about it. Nvidia dominates the market with 80% of the market share. As Game of Thrones has taught us, every king sits on a throne made of swords. Why? Because every victory invites 100 more battles. So customers have raised a lot of concerns recently about scarcity, about delays, and about Nvidia's pricing power. The second largest in the market is AMD, and they have a lot of innovation as well. But their pitch is sometimes very simple. We're not Nvidia. And in many cases, that works. So here's a thought for all of us to ponder. In the early eras of integrated circuit, companies like Texas Instrument and others sat on that throne. Then came the PC era, and Intel became the king. Now we're entering the AI era, and it's Nvidia's turn to take that throne. So that begs the question, who will be next? So what are the key takeaways here? The entire arc of Nvidia's rise and fall and rise again has 3 practical lessons for us. First, Nvidia is like Rocky Balboa, taking the hits, stumbling and falling so often, and yet getting up again and again. The early years were all pain, no gain, no glory, but they stayed in the ring long enough to be the trillion-dollar king 30 years after they started. So in your careers and ventures, it's likely that you will fail more often than you will succeed. I know this to be true because in my career, I've failed 8 out of 10 times. But as this case study shows, true belief beats true brilliance, right? We don't have to win every round. We just have to stay standing for the next one. And please, I am in no way glorifying pain and failure. When we fail, it hurts. It hurts like heck. You lose all hope. It's depressing. It is sad. And yeah, it sucks. But building that grit is equally essential in the long run. My favorite Jensen quote is from his speech at Stanford in 2003, where he said, "My will to survive exceeds almost everybody else's will to kill me. Second lesson, whatever definition of success you have in mind, please remember that success is not a destination. We never arrive there, because as soon as you achieve what you wanted to, you or the world around you will want more. All you can do in life is to keep learning, keep moving, and keep growing. Your strengths and your success may attract as much criticism and pressure as your failures did. And sometimes holding on to that lead will take way more energy than earning it. In a way, the Nvidia story reminds us of the Mission Impossible movies. Every time Ethan Hunt and his team survive one mission, the only thing waiting for them is another impossible mission. And the final lesson, success and risk go hand in hand. Nvidia went through some dark times, but when they saw the light at the end of the tunnel, they moved with ferocious speed, making bold and almost existential bets. They took more risks while others played it safe. And I think there's a lesson in there for all of us as well. Whether it's taking a new job or moving to another city or starting a new business, risk and reward are joined at the hip. And like Jensen did with Sega, sometimes it's okay to ask for the impossible. It may not always work, but you might just find out what is possible. And that simple idea fills me with endless optimism. So I hope this story gave you something to latch onto, something to carry forward. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this every week. Thank you, and I love you.